Mr. Marshall Dane, welcome to Totally Driven Radio.
Right on, right on. Thanks for having me, brother.
Hey, man, I got to ask right out of the bat, how does a person from Canada get involved in country music instead of hockey?
We do hockey first, and then we go to country music.
So hockey is the opening act when you play?
Exactly. We have a couple of guys come out on stage, and they just kind of, it's more like ball hockey because we don't usually ice the stage, but otherwise, yeah. A couple of regular Canucks,
At any time, were you into hockey, playing hockey at all, or just went right into the music?
Well, like most musicians, I shouldn't say like most musicians, but I was too small for hockey at some point, and by that I mean I just didn't want to be beat up by the bigger guys in hockey. So at some point, probably by about 15 or 16, I was calling it quits and left it to my little brothers who were much taller than me by that point, and then I, decided to just play music instead.
Wow. So what was it that totally pulled you over to the dark side of music?
It was right when they took me, when one of the pastors in my church took me out and said, "Son, if you follow the way of the musician, it will only lead you to the devil and the darker side." And not to say that I was intrigued, but it was probably more the fact they told me not to that I thought, well, then I just might have to do this. And, yeah, so there you go.
Isn't that always the way? They tell you not, and you do it anyway.
I hate when they tell me not to do something. I end up doing it, but I'm glad they made me. I'm glad they gave me the ultimatum at that point because I really haven't looked back ever since. I've just been playing and writing and trying to keep working at it so that I can maintain it as my full-time, part-time job.
That's
full-time,
cool.
part-time pay job.
Yeah, right. So who were some of your early influences that really got you into music?
Well, I'd say the earliest influences were my grandmother because she was the one with the record player. My folks had tape decks and stuff, but my grandmother had a cool collection of records, and I mean, I don't know if you ever heard that song, If You Go Down in the Woods Today, the Teddy Bear's Picnic, that's what it's called. Anyways, there was some old stuff by a guy named Bing Crosby, and my grandma had Peter, Paul, and Mary, and some of my favorites I remember were, there was a Canadian guy by the name of John Denver, and so I would always listen to those records over and over again. And one of my all-time favorites that my grandma had was she had a Kenny Rogers Greatest Hits record, and I would just sit there and play those songs over and over again, close my eyes, and I was just listening to the fact that I knew this guy was riding on a train with a gambler, or he was, he suffered from scarlet fever, that girl broke his heart, that kind of thing. So I fell in love with those songs, and then after that it was my three older sisters' influence of Bon Jovi and Motley Crue and the rest of it.
Wow.
Now it's all mixed together in my music.
Yeah, I was going to say, your influences are all over the place then, from Bing Crosby to Kenny Rogers to hair bands from the 80s.
Wait till I tell you about how my best friend was a big fan of the Beastie Boys, and I can't get the Beastie Boys out of my head, which I don't mind. I mean, I like them, too.
The Beastie Boys, like, back in the day when they came out, it was like considered a joke almost, and now they're, like, revered as, like, the ultimate band.
They were almost kind of like, to me, they were like the old Eminem, and I like Eminem, too, so... But they were kind of like, like the original Eminem when he first came out. What's that song? With the real Slim Shady, Please Stand Up.
Slim Shady, yeah, right.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was. That's why I like the Beastie Boys. They weren't taking themselves too seriously as I do the stutter rap. That's all I got.
So you played your first gig at 15?
Yeah, I started playing guitar when I was 12, and then by the time I was 15, me and my friends used to go to this little cafe on Lake Ontario. There was this little part of town where I grew up, and we used to go there. And I remember, you probably never heard of them, but there was this kind of a big deal band back in probably, I guess, mid to late 80s, and I heard about them somewhere in the 90s. A band called Honeymoon Suite, and they were based out of Niagara Falls, and I remember one of the guys came in and tried to get a gig at this cafe when I was there just hanging out having a hot taco with my friends, and the guy wanted $100, and the owner was so blown away by, that's way too expensive. Who pays a musician $100? So he looked over at me and he says, hey, this guy just tried to get $100 out of me to play on the weekends. Why don't you come play on Friday and Saturday? I heard you play music. And yeah, I play music. I need like 13 songs. So he said, for $35 and a plate of cheesecake, you can come down here and play your 13 songs. So that's what I did. That was my first gig, and I actually made a little record probably just a few years after doing that gig called $35 and Cheesecake, which was just a collection of some of my earlier works, some of my greatest hits, my classic tunes.
Oh, that's funny. Now, did you ever, by chance, run into that guy ever later on in your career?
No, but I have actually stopped by the cafe. It's still there. It's I can't remember if they still call it Sweets Cafe. It was called Sweets Cafe back in the day, but now it's called something. I think it's just something else cafe, and different owners, different place. But when I walk in, it's just a trip down memory lane because, I remember in the corner that was my little spot, and I'd bring in my amplifier. I didn't have a mixing board or anything like that, so I had two inputs on my amplifier, so I'd plug a 1/4-inch microphone into one, and my 1/4-inch guitar, makeshift pickup for my acoustic, put that in there. And yeah, good memories, good times. Nice little stomping ground.
So it was just you yourself on there on the stage doing your thing.
That was it. And I mean, the way I looked at it was, I was 15, so I didn't know anything about doing a gig, but I thought, 13 songs, it takes about 5 minutes to drink a cup of coffee. So by the time they're done their coffee, I'll have a new crowd and I can play my songs over again. And sure enough, during the first night, people stuck around. And of course, after the first set, that was my initial stages of being nervous or being, not stage fright, what do you call it? Just all the chaos that happens behind the scenes, during a big show. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And at the time, instantly I was like, oh, I got 13 songs. These people have heard them all, and they're still here. Now what do I do? So I started changing up the way I would play it. The same 13 songs, I do it again. I just do it in a different order. But that's now led me to doing it now when I do a version of a tune. Like if somebody asks me to do a cover song at a show, either they really like the fact that I change it up and I make it different, or they really don't. But usually, yeah. I usually just try and tell them that I'm fixing Hotel California. Oh, yeah, no, this is the new version of Stairway to Heaven. I'm just fixing it. It was broken.
There you go. You just little minor tweaks to make it a little bit better.
Yeah, man, those guys only had it so far. I'm taking it the rest of the way.
Now, you went to Nashville for a class in composing music.
Well, that's the way it's worded. But basically, what that means is I went down to Nashville for basically a whole bunch of songwriting, and what that in turn does is, it's basically a master class in songwriting. It really is. Going to Nashville to write it's like going to the Mecca of wherever they do whatever they do. So, if you want to play tennis with the best tennis players, you go to where they're hanging out and you learn, a ton from just what they're doing, and you watch them play and you try and play with better players. Same thing. I went down to Nashville to try and see, what is it like when guys write 4 times a day, 5-6 days a week, for the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, up to 20 years. And let me tell you, it's so inspiring and enjoyable to write with people that write that much. They don't have any reservations. They have no judgment. They don't think, oh, I used that word in a song last week. They're like, I used that song twice, or I used that word twice already today, and let's do it again. Maybe we'll make a better version of it. As opposed to when you're writing on your own, you tend to think of what you wrote yesterday and you think, oh, I don't want to write that again. These guys,
right.
They just don't have the reservation like that, and they have such an arsenal of words and chords and changes and ideas that it really, it taught me a ton. It was great.
That's pretty awesome. It's weird too. Nashville was always known, I guess like the country music capital, and it seems like over the years, especially over the last 10 years, I guess, or maybe even more, it's not just country music anymore. I mean, there's a lot of, hard rockers that have made Nashville their home. And I guess that's probably for the reason, because whether they've tried to do the crossover into country or just the musical hotspot that it's become, it's weird that it's opened up to all different genres of music now.
I mean, I agree, and I think it's beautiful that it's become that. It's become a hub for people to go and either feel the inspiration so they can write the song that they want, or, I mean, because again, it's all about inspiration, and
Sure.
whether you're writing at home or you take off to as we do here in Canada, we go to the cottage for a few. You might go to the cottage for a week and try and get some writing done there. But when you go to Nashville, it almost feels like you could write, I mean, and you end up writing at wee hours of the morning. You could write at 9 in the morning. You could write at 12 o'clock noon. You have a session
Right.
booked for 4, and then you go out again at 9 o'clock at night and write with somebody else. You feel like you're it's like going on a retreat. You just end up in this place where, I mean, the guy serving you gas is a songwriter. The girl behind the desk serving you bubble gum is a songwriter. Like, it's all around you. So you can't help but be inspired. And, I mean, ever since I started going down there, I started thinking, why wouldn't anybody that is looking for a song not come here? And, I mean, they have just a mecca of great music. So, yeah, it's cool. I'm glad that people diversify and go down there. I mean, I hear about rockers that go down there that, aren't trying to necessarily go country, but
Right.
they like the fact that they can write that kind of heartfelt song that can come out of a country writer.
Now, was that your only time in Nashville, or have you been there other times as well?
I've been back several times. I go back, I try and go back a couple times a year to do some writing. We're just getting ready to go back down probably around April, May, and do some more as well.
Very cool. Now, how about in Canada, like, what's the country music scene like? Because we've had a few of your manager, Michael Stover. We've had a few of his other artists who are also Canadian country singers, and like when we had the first one on a year ago, Amy Rose. I mean, I'm not a big country fan, and I said to her, like, I'm just impressed that there's a country music scene in Canada. Like, didn't expect it, but now that you're the third person in a year from Canada that's a country music artist I've interviewed, it's like there must be a scene going on up there.
There's definitely a scene. I mean, it's kind of like our soccer scene. It's not the biggest scene we have, but
Right.
we've got it. You just have to find the fans. And I mean, and again, I've been asked before, that there's a difference between Canadian country music and American country music, and of course there is. That's just like American movies, Canadian movies. There's bound to be a difference, and that's cool. That's the diversity once again of the planet. There are people. It's basically I want to say the MO, the bottom line. If you grew up, I mean, for instance, me, I grew up in a strong Christian household that was very fundamental and very, I don't want to say strict is the word, but they really pushed, the kind of the family values thing, love your neighbor, just the real, some strong rooted value stuff. And in country music across the globe, even more so than like folk music tends to be about, anything from, the political, things going on to the things that are happening on the rural streets. But country music tends to, at least in my mind, it reflects some of those home values, and those just good old times kind of things. We don't have good old boys like you have, south of the Mason-Dixon line in the States. Obviously, it's different, but you get out to the, really outskirt parts of Alberta, or even you get out to any of the outskirt parts of any of our provinces in Canada, and you will find people just, it's kind of like a little Nashville. You go, you find these pockets, and guys in trucks, people riding horses, they're cranking country songs on their station as if it's, a regular meal of the day. And
right.
and I mean, you'd think they'd be blaring Bryan Adams rock, but or pop rock, whatever you call that, but and playing hockey. But instead, they're doing that. So there's definitely a scene out here, and it's again, I mean, it has its little differences from American country, just like it has its differences from UK country. Like the German dude that's doing country music, it all sounds a little different. But at the end of the day, it's kind of all the same memo operandi, or whatever you call it, same kind of vibe.
It's actually, we interviewed, I don't know if you ever heard of this person, Danko Jones, who's a Canadian hard rocker. We interviewed him last week. And one of the things I said to him was, when you were starting out, did you want to focus on Canada, or was your plan immediately to try to go to the States and make it in the States? And for him, it was, I wanted to get to the States, which pissed off a lot of the Canadian people and Canadian fans, where he's actually like, now 16 years later, he's like, for 2014, after 16 years, my focus is now for this year to focus on Canada. So I'm going to ask you, like, when you were starting out, was your focus try to just stick with Canada, or was your focus always to try to make it to Nashville or the rest of the United States?
I would say that my focus has always been to make my music as widespread as possible. Said that, there is no denying, the super power of America. And if you were to ever be able to tap in to the marketing that is American music, sure, you would have a bigger sea to navigate through, and that would be wonderful. In the efforts of trying to spread, in my case, I'm just trying to spread, some goodwill, bring some smiles to people, have a good time, and preach a message of encouragement, kind of thing. So even though I wanted to make it as big as possible, and to shout it out from the mountaintops as best I could, I'm also a firm believer in, if you can't build it here, you probably won't be able to build it there. That's just my take on it. Now, said that, I'm noticing a huge impact from just recently, working with Michael to get some, American exposure. I'm noticing that people are taking it and enjoying it differently and more, I don't want to say rapidly, but again, because America's got a different and a stronger maybe country or larger country scene, they tend to, listen to my stuff and say, oh, that's different and good. So they enjoy it. It's a nice, fresh kind of taste of country for them. But I still am a believer in, build it here. If it works here, you can move it to the States. And so as I've been doing, I've been trying to, I've been working it here, work in my own pond, kind of thing, fish here and make sure that, I get all my, how do you say it? I'm looking for the right word, but basically expose myself to everything that's in my pond here. And now we've been doing that for just a few years, and we've taken the little baby step of trying to, bring it a little bit south of our border. But, yeah, I mean, so unlike Danko Jones, and I mean, again, it's all circumstantial, right? If what he's doing is getting accepted south of the border, then go and fly with it, if it just so happens to not catch here. But in my case, we've been able to have a good, every time we cast out, a new single or try out a new territory and travel through there on a tour, we get great responses. So, I do believe in building it strong here and also we have a smaller block to try and make some noise in. So, I've always felt not intimidated, but I've always felt like, hey, man, if I go to America, there's another guy in America already that's doing the same thing I'm doing here in Canada, trying to build in his own pond. So, I mean, I think we're so close that it's easy to cross the border,
You're only a hop, skip, and a jump, so yeah.
Yeah, it's so close. It's easy to kind of blur the lines of where you're going to try and build it first. And if the fire has already started in America, then go to America and start and keep building the fire. If it started here, keep building it here. If it's meant to cross, it'll cross. Right.
And especially with the world of the internet now, I mean, it's a lot easier to help build that fire.
Totally, 100%. I mean, look at you and me are talking right now. And, that wouldn't have happened 20 years ago, it might not have been that easy.
This
it wasn't
absolutely.
that easy. Not that it might not have been. It wouldn't have been. Who's kidding who?
Now, one thing you said was about having a good time. And I noticed in a few of your song titles, one was, I think, Love and Alcohol, and another one, which I have queued up ready to go, is Alcohol Abuse. So that, I wonder, are you a person that likes to drink and have a good time?
You haven't heard the song I'll Be Your Whiskey yet, no?
No, I didn't hear that one.
Yeah. You know, I definitely like to have a good time. Do I like alcohol? Sure, I like alcohol. You know, I technically, I mean, as much as it sounds like all my songs are about, I mean, they are about alcohol, but technically my message is, I shouldn't even say my message, but my songs aren't actually, let's get a beer and let's go get drunk. You know, they're usually like, hey, love and alcohol. Can't touch that stuff, it all gets the best of me. You know, or I'll be your whiskey, so why don't you lay the bottle down and just kiss me? You know, so, and alcohol abuse is really all just about spilling your drinks. But then again, I guess that happens after you've had a few. So, yeah. You know what, it's years of playing in the bars. You know, you just get inspired by the people you're looking at, and you're trying to write songs for the people that, you know, are willing to trudge out in the middle of any kind of weather, especially now here in Canada. We've got some pretty inclement weather. And they're willing to come on out and listen to music. So I end up doing songs for the nighttime crowd.
So the alcohol abuse song, I guess you've been inspired many times by watching people spill their drinks over the years.
Yeah, you can see a lot from the stage. People have no idea how much you can hear and how much you can see from being up on stage. So, yeah, I mean, it's that classic. You know, somebody spills a beer and somebody else yells out alcohol abuse, and next thing you know, there's a fight breaking out in the corner of the bar, and a guitar player is trying to put his foot up to keep the speakers from falling on the stage. The bass player is putting his hand out, playing his bass with his left hand so he can hold on to another speaker so it doesn't fall. You know, that kind of stuff.
Good times, good times. All right, so let's why don't we play that song now? Give everybody a little taste of some alcohol abuse. Here you go, everybody. Marshall Dane, Alcohol Abuse. Don't spill your drink. Here we go. And there he is, Marshall Dane with Alcohol Abuse. And I got to say, when I hear that song, I get a slight chuckle with the cooking sherry line every time.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to bring that up.
But
hey,
it fits
sometimes
good.
You got to do what you got to do.
You got to do what you got to do, and it works good. It fits right in there perfectly.
I could have put straight vermouth, but then I thought, no, cooking sherry rhymes.
Cooking sherry, yeah, definitely. Cooking sherry is much better. That's funny. Now, a few years ago, somebody caught your act and helped you out a lot.
Yeah, speaking of rock and roll, so here's something that stuck with me, and maybe for some of your listeners, if there's any budding artists out there, musicians. One thing I noticed over the years was there was always these great bands that would play in some of our kind of cool little pockets of music clubs, and some of them were just awesome, and some of them were awesome, but then they stayed exactly the same, and they got a little bored, or they got a little stifled or stale, and I always made it a bit of my thing just to cure my own boredom, to make sure I was exciting, changing up either the way I did a cover song so that they'd be intrigued and interested and you know, listen or whatever. So where was I going here with this? So it's to me it was always something that I wanted to make sure it was exciting. And I remember a guy walking in one time, and he stopped me after my song, and he goes, "Marshall, I walked in here, and I thought there must have been a packed house. Like, coming from outside, the music was not blaring, hurting it, but the music was pumping. I walked in, and you're just giving it like you're at a massive arena, and there was 10 people in there." And he said, I love that because it makes me feel, I get excited when I walk in, and you're always giving it to the end. So back in I guess it would have maybe the early part of 2011, maybe the mid part, actually it was the midway of 2011, I was here in my hometown doing a show at a club that I play every Tuesday night. And it just so happened, I don't know if you guys down in the States have heard of a band called the Cranberries.
Yes.
Okay, so you remember that, like Zombie and Linger and Dreams. So I was sitting there doing what I do at 5 minutes to 2 in the morning, and it just so happened the Cranberries were just outside of my town, about 15 minutes, at a nationally, if not internationally, recognized studio as being one of the top studios in the country. And they were recording their new record. And the manager and one of the other partners decided, you know, we didn't want to go, the lead singer, I guess, Dolores, didn't want to go back into the city of Toronto to stay for the night. So they got a hotel just around the corner in my town. And the manager and his buddy decided to go out for a drink for a last call. And they walked in at 5 minutes to 2 in the morning. And it wasn't that busy. I mean, it wasn't dead. It was pretty good. It was, 40, 50 people in there. But me and my band were giving it like it was, a massive concert. And it was because of that drive, that totally driven, attitude of mine to go in there and make sure that, we were giving it. And they walked in and they were impressed. They were, excited. They got intrigued enough that the next day they tried to find me. Well, it just so happens that the next day I left for a big festival on the east coast of Canada in Prince Edward Island, and I was there for 4 days, then came home and went directly to Nashville to write for 3 weeks, and then I came back home and went directly to the North Canadian Arctic to do a tour out there for 3 weeks. So 2.5 months later, I was walking through a park behind my house, just going for a little walk, and I had some guy in a big black SUV Escalade, Cadillac, pulls up, rolls down his windows, and goes, "Marshall Dane?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I'm not stalking you. Just so happens I recognized you as you're walking by, and I wanted to let you know that there was a guy that was out here a couple of months back when you were performing, and he wanted to get in touch with you and talk to you about, whatever it is that you're working on." And it just so happens that guy he was referring to was the manager of the Cranberries. So long story made a little bit less long is that we ended up talking over the next course of a few months. They ended up accompanying me to the Canadian Country Music Awards, where I was showcasing for a new artist showcase that I got, kind of elected into. And it was because of that always striving to, give the best show until the last second, that we ended up working together, and what took, it took several months to try and work it out. But as it turned out, they ended up being the ones to take on and help me make my current album one of these days, which Alcohol Abuse is a part of that record collection. And yeah, I mean, and there's a perfect example of a rock genre, entity looking over and saying, "Hey man, that stuff rocks. I mean, whatever it is that you're doing, it's country, but it rocks." So I ended up actually opening up for the Cranberries when they came to Toronto back in 2011 or 2012, I guess it would have been by then. So, yeah, I mean, it's, it's one of those kind of, do it until you're exhausted. And if you're that guy, somebody, sooner or later. And, I mean, I've always thought somebody might just walk in. You never know who's going to walk in. I can't afford to buy certain opportunities, so I better just make sure I'm a hard worker all the time. And in this case, it paid off, and that cool little thing, really is a neat little story about how somebody walks into a bar and says, "Hey, I think I can help these guys out." And it just so happens that the company, like the Cranberries company that they work with for management, are the same guys that discovered Nirvana. And they manage the Beastie Boys. So, right on.
Coming full circle with the Beastie Boys. Look at that.
Yeah.
Have you played any other shows or any other big name artists?
I've had some real cool blessings, man. Like some really cool opportunities. I know there's bigger and I know there's less. And in my case, I've had great opportunities to play with. A guy named Alan Jackson. You've probably heard of him. I've opened up for him. Kevin Costner, the actor. I've been lucky, and I mean, I say lucky, but at the same time, it was just a cool, laid back. He was so chill. I've had experiences to hang out with him a couple times, watching a UFC fight at a local, nice restaurant or whatever. And then I had the opportunity to open up for him when he came to Canada to play with his country band. I was asked to open up for Reba McEntire. Some really cool cats, man. It's a real I got to pinch myself every once in a while to make sure that, I'm staying on top of my game, because those opportunities I really feel are a huge blessing, and and a lot of people would love to have them. So I take advantage of the fact that I've been given those cards.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I mean, especially when it's people like you've looked up to over the years, and you get the chance to share a stage with them and open a show for them. And it's such an incredible feeling.
Yeah, man. You kind of you feel like all of a sudden in that one small moment, you feel like, hey, man, we're peers. Like you're a huge guy. Like Alan Jackson, for instance. He's a huge artist, and he's a great influence. I love his music. I could listen to it all day and all night. And there I am, walking to my trailer sweating as he's getting ready to go out on stage and do his job. It's like, yeah, I warmed it up for you, man. You're lucky. You're welcome.
Now, is it always, when you perform, is it always you with your backing band, or do you go back into being that 15-year-old kid working for a slice of cheesecake and just pull out a guitar and do some acoustic shows yourself, too?
I'm a working musician, so I do all kinds of shows. I went out the other day and just walked, I went out to a little house party, and I brought my banjo with me. Just because. I didn't end up actually pulling it out. I just brought it just in case, because I still enjoy, the simple. The way I grew up was every Sunday you just go to Grandma's house, and whoever has an instrument brings an instrument, and it's just part of the goodwill. It's part of the good vibe. It's your dish that you're able to bring, your potluck. I still have local shows in my town. Every Tuesday night I do a show with a friend of mine on drums and a keyboard player, and just me on acoustic. No bass, no electrics. There's other shows I've done, I get a chance to do, and you bring a saxophone player in because the fiddle player can't make it. So there's always that nice variety of different instrumentation, and going from the little, intimate private house party with 25 people when you're acoustic by yourself to, those crazy moments when there's 30,000 people out front and you're backstage doing jumping jacks, getting ready to go out on stage and light a fire.
Right. Now, you mentioned
literally.
You mentioned your latest album, One of These Days.
Yep.
Now, that came out last year?
Yeah, it just came out in May of last year.
Cool. And actually, I have the title track of that song queued up, too, so we can give that a spin real quick, too. Now, this song's more of like almost like a country pop rock song.
Yeah, that would be a great way to describe it, actually. That's my typical, I think, style of writing is in One of These Days. And there's always a few tracks on every album that is, if I don't think too hard about it, that's what I kind of write, exactly that style right there. One of These Days was written in July of 2011. It was one of the first songs I started writing. Actually, it's the title track for the record, and that same trip I made in July of 2011, I wrote a couple of tunes on that trip, and the one of the songs ended up being the last song on the record as well. One of These Days was just meant to be, and which is again why it's became the title track, because it represents all the other songs, and then it's about being uplifted, having the strength to say, you know what, yesterday was one thing, that the past is the past. Now is today. Now is the time that if we're going to make a change, let's stop waiting to make that change. I remember a friend a long time ago, gave me a coaster, and on it said, round to it, T-U-I-T. And I thought, what's a round to it? And the guy says, well, you ever had those times when you just never got around to it? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, now you have a round to it, and you can get to that thing you're postponing. So One of These Days is really about finally getting around to it, finally getting to that point where you say, hey, man, I've got a little bit of cash, we got a little bit of gas. We don't need all that to get, the time in to spend with either family or, someone you care about, and taking a little bit of time to enjoy life and to really to grasp it. So that's what One of These Days is meant to be, an encouraging, uplifting, empowering kind of song.
Nice. All right, let's give that a spin, everybody. Here we go. Marshall Dane, the title track of his latest Is it CD, iTunes? Is there an actual physical CD too?
Oh, there's a physical CD. There's no actual physical record,
right?
But there's definitely a physical CD you can find on iTunes as well. Yeah.
You got to ask anymore. Is there an actual physical CD? Because a lot of times anymore it's just like, nope, just iTunes.
Wow. You know what? I haven't gotten to that point yet where I'm just a digital only guy. I still believe in the artwork. I still believe in the liner notes. I still believe in putting a thank you in there.
We had a local hip hop artist from the Philadelphia area. He released his last album on USB.
Wow. I guess I've heard of that too. Yeah, that's kind of neat.
Yeah. I was like, okay. I mean,
it's a digital age, man. It's all changing. It's whatever way you can skin the cat.
Yeah, everybody's trying to do something different. But all right, so here we go. Marshall Dane, One of These, and there it is, One of These Days by Marshall Dane. That's got such a great, powerful chorus to it.
Thanks, man.
That's one of them ones you can just summertime cruising around, sing along songs to.
It reminds me of Tom Petty, 'cause I'm free falling.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. It's just got one of these days. I might have ripped it off. No, I'm just kidding.
So, all right. So, where can everybody get your CDs, and where can we see Marshall Dane playing at?
Well, this is exciting to say because as far as where you can see Marshall Dane playing at, this being our first time going into the States, we are gearing up to do a little bit of an American radio tour. So I'm not too sure exactly at this point where it's going to take us, but we could very well be coming to a town near you. So if you wanted to find out about that, we're looking at April, May to travel into the States. You can always find out information on where we're playing and listen to our songs at marshalldane.com. If you want to check out the latest videos, just go to youtube.com/MarshallDane. If you're on Facebook, it's Marshall Dane Music, so facebook.com/Marshall Dane Music. Twitter is @MarshallDane. I pretty much have the all @Marshall Danes locked down. So if you're trying to find me, just type in my name, and we make it pretty easy for you to find us. If you want to go to iTunes and sample some songs, you can go there and just search my name, and you'll see the whole album up there, and you can test out anything you want.
Nice. Cool. If you come to the States, if you come to Philly, we'll have to hook up and maybe drink some cooking sherry.
Yeah. I'll bring the straight vermouth, and you bring the cooking sherry, and we'll have ourselves a good old time.
Cooking sherry and cheesesteaks.
Get drunk faster.
Cooking sherry and cheesesteaks.
Yeah. Well, I got no problem with cheesesteak. Sounds good. Actually,
Nice.
yeah, you guys have the Philly cheesesteak down there. I would get it up here, but yeah, man, our Canadian version is okay, but man, I'd love to have it from the horse's mouth. I'd love to come down to Philly and do that. You got it, brother. That's definitely a meeting.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, last week we had, if you watch like a lot of the food shows, this guy's been on a lot of them from the Philly area. Actually, he's got a show coming out on Spike in a couple months. Tony Luke. So Google him. He's like the poster boy of the Philly cheesesteak now.
I might have to try and like work out a recipe up here and then go down there and give you my Canadian version of a chili or of a Philly cheesesteak. It might have Canadian bacon in it or something. What?
Oh, it's too funny. Hey, for being Canadian though, I don't hear an accent and not one A. I'm
surprised you don't hear the A because I know I say it. But maybe I'm well versed in my no word whisker kind of speaking. I try not to put too many ums and ahs and maybe A's in there. And as for the accent, you know what, man? Since I was a kid, I've had people say, I don't sound exactly, with a strong Canadian accent. I mean, I guess I've tried to put it on, but I mean, it just doesn't come out right. So, yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I was a telemarketer at 15, 16, I guess I was 16, just after I was doing my gig. And I was working with an American dude that he had like a southern drawl. Like he had that real Tennessee kind of, Georgian kind of,
twang,
drawl to his voice, American drawl. And I think I maybe just picked it up, but I don't know, man. It is what it is. I sound like how I sound.
Well, this has been a lot of fun, Marshall. I want to thank you for being a guest and letting us listen to some of your music and spread the word around the world of Marshall Dane.
Hey, brother, thank you so much for your time, and it's my pleasure to join you. I would love to join you again throughout the course of the coming months and years, and, yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate you helping to spread the word.
Awesome, man. Yeah, like I said, if you come to Philly, let's hook up.
Sounds good, brother.
Cool. All right, everybody, there he is, Marshall Dane. Go to marshalldane.com. Check him out on iTunes. Buy his CD. Go on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, or just Google Marshall Dane and everything will come up. Marshall, thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good, brother. Thank you. And you guys have an awesome night. And I'd like to thank your listeners and your fans of your show for tuning in and being a part of the circle of music, man.
Cool. Very nice. Thanks,
Right,
man. You too. Have a good night.
Cheers, brother. You too.
There he is, Marshall Dane. Good dude.
There he is. Yeah.
That's awesome.